Good afternoon. Just wanted to come down and do a video from a pretty unique location actually. It's a bit of an impromptu stop, but there are several interesting things that happened right on this spot during the Second World War. Where we are at the moment is out in the mountains, just to the west of Carcassone, which is in southern France. Vichy France, as it was in the early part of the Second World War, until it was finally occupied by German forces towards the end. And this is why this particular area is of interest. This mountain road leads up towards Carcassone from the south, and it's here that German forces actually left as part of their retreat when the Second Front opened in August of 1944. And here is a memorial that's a particularly interesting one, with a fascinating story attached to it, which relates to a group of American OSS, Officer Strategic Services, paratroopers that were dropped in to this area to help kind of bolster the local marquee, the French resistance, in their attempts to hinder the Germans as they retreated back towards northern France, and to avoid being captured by a kind of spearhead from Normandy onwards. And this particular location here marks the burial place of a certain lieutenant, or lieutenant as it would be in the American Army, Paul Swank, who was killed in action here on the 17th of August 1944. He had actually only been in this country for 2 days, having dropped in with a group of a dozen or so paratroopers, of which he was a joint commander, or second in command I should say, of this OSS team that had been dropped in to deliver weapons to the marquee, and also to help with basically sabotage efforts around the area. And this road that you can see is fairly busy and a little bit noisy along here is the same road that a group of 250 German troops in Convoy were due to take as part of their retreat back north. In fact, they'd actually come down from this direction here. And this OSS team, who had been tasked over the previous couple of days with bridge building, were made aware of the fact that there was a German convoy coming in this direction. And at this very spot here, you can see, if the sun allows, this very spot here was where the OSS team decided to make a small stand. There was only 4 Americans and about a dozen local marquee that were up to this point. What had happened is that they'd taken a load of explosives, the idea being to try and blast some of this rock face here away into the road down towards the river, blocking off this route of escape. As it turned out, they'd been informed upon, and the Germans were aware that this sabotage effort was in the offing, and they sent up a troop of heavily armed soldiers to come and try and clear the route ahead of their retreat. And that was exactly what was happening, in that the Americans, led by Paul Swank here, had blown in part of this area here, which today has been cleared, with the hope of blocking the road. As it happened, they hadn't used sufficient explosive, and it turned out that the road was still open. And Lieutenant Swank, along with an American sergeant, to their credit, came back down here, knowing that the Germans were approaching, in an effort to hold them off using their automatic weapons. And it's from here that they made a kind of last-ditch stand against the Germans that were coming from the road just behind this mound here. As the rest of the marquee and American forces retreated up into the hills in that direction there, so they kind of scrambled up, tried to find firing positions from which to support the 2 men down here. The American sergeant was wounded in the hand and foot, but managed to retreat his way back up there, and eventually actually escaped and survived. But the unfortunate lieutenant here very bravely stayed on, was shot 4 times, but still managed to keep on fighting against the Germans coming up the road there, until eventually he fell immobilised in some way. The local stories say that he drew his revolver and kept on fighting until at point blank range a German officer came along and shot him in the head, finally killing him. It's a unique place and a pretty unique story actually here for this time, just on the side of the road. Unfortunately the sun is too bright that we can't see clearly up the road, but that's the location, that's the direction that the Germans came from, and this is where the lieutenant fell. This is actually his burial place. The unusual thing is that the Americans had insisted on him being repatriated back to the States against his express wish that he'd mentioned to his family, that actually he wanted to be buried where he fell in action. And so after the war, his parents, his family, paid for his body to be returned to this spot where he fell, and he's interned here and still lies here today. But one of those really rare glimpses of kind of some of these very small operations that went on all over occupied Europe, and this is just one of them which happened in these in and around these hills here, and is a lasting memorial to this American lieutenant and the work that the work that him and the team in the Marquis had done in trying to disable the German war effort, if only in small part. But it was on this road and around this area that this incident took place on the 17th of August 1944.